So as I'm reviewing the different Gen AI music sites to point out their features, talk about pros, cons, and alleviate some of the fears I hear being passed around so easily, it isn't until I stumbled upon the terms of agreements for Boomy. Wow. To put this in perspective, I wanted to project an honest narrative that's fact-based and unbiased. So I had ChatGPT read the terms and conditions and interpret them for me. Here's the review from ChatGPT, and after I'll elaborate. My goal is to help inform artists, not to spread fear, not to say things that aren't true. So to be fair, not all Gen AI is like this. This one just stood out, and I paused the review to put this out because I found it so pertinent. And you should definitely read the terms on any platform and know exactly what they are. It's our responsibility as artists to make sure we know our rights of ownership. I asked ChatGPT if my understanding was correct because I felt it was exploitative. And this is what it said. Based on Boomy's terms, it is fair to argue that their approach is highly restrictive and potentially exploitative, particularly for users who may not fully understand the implications of the ownership and licensing terms. Now here's a breakdown of the most concerning elements and why they might indeed deserve scrutiny in your review. Number one, Boomy owns all generated tracks. According to section 8.1, all tracks shall for the inception and of creation be the sole property of Boomy, and Boomy can treat these tracks as works for hire. The implications? This means that any music you create on Boomy is owned entirely by them, not by you. Boomy holds exclusive rights to the tracks, including the right to copyright in their name, create derivative works, and use it in any way they choose without your approval or involvement. Why is this problematic? Well, for artists, this is a drastic departure from the traditional model where the creators retain ownership. Here, users have zero claim to their own music, which is unusual even amongst generative AI platforms. The setup restricts artists' ability to monetize or manage their own creations independently. 2. Licensing is heavily limited. Clause section 8.2 outlines a non-exclusive, non-transferable, and non-sublicensable license for users with severe limitations on how they can use the tracks. The implications, while users can share their music on approved platforms like YouTube or TikTok, they cannot commercially exploit the music without Boomy's explicit permission. Boomy retains exclusive control over high-value uses like synchronization, movies, games, broadcasts, live events, and even digital collectibles like NFTs. Now, why is this problematic? Many generative platforms allow users more flexibility with their own creations, particularly if they pay for a subscription, like Suno. Boomy's model is akin to giving users only a personal use license, while Boomy retains exclusive commercial rights limiting artists' control over their own output. 3. Exploitation of users' contributions. Clause in Section 10, Boomy claims ownership of any Boomy-generated material, which includes cover art and the creative outputs generated through the platform. Not only does Boomy take ownership of the music, but also any generated art or visual content, leaving creators with no control over anything they produce within the platform. Now, this is problematic because this claim overall output can be seen as overly broad and may discourage artists who want to maintain some of the ownership of their creative works, even if it is made with AI assistance. Revenue sharing is limited and controlled. Clause. Boomy offers an 80% share of its net revenue to users who submit tracks for distribution. Now, distribution terms. Section 4. Implications. Net revenue is calculated after fees that Boomy determines, and Boomy can deduct processing fees, distribution costs, and other charges. There is also ambiguity around whether Boomy can decline or offset revenue if it believes streams are illegitimate. Why this is problematic? The potential deductions could significantly reduce actual earnings. Boomy has considerable discretion over what fees to deduct and what constitutes legitimate revenue, which could mean users end up earning far less than anticipated. Waiver of moral rights, clause section 8.1, also states that users irrevocably waive all moral rights in their music. The implications: waiving moral rights means that users have no say if Boomy decides to alter, remix, or use their music in context they may find inappropriate, contrary to the artist's intent. And why is this problematic? This clause is especially harsh for creators who care about the context and integrity of their work. It means Boomy can exploit the music in any way they choose without concern for the artist's original vision. Mandatory arbitration and class action waiver. Section 19 and 22 require users to settle disputes via arbitration on an individual basis, waiving the right to class actions or jury trials. The implications, this limits the user's ability to take legal action against Boomy in court or as part of a class action, making it harder for users to collectively challenge unfair terms or practices. This is problematic because mandatory arbitration is often seen as disadvantageous for consumers because it can favor companies by limiting users' access to court and deterring collective legal actions that can enforce change. So I asked, is it, fair to say this is exploitative and should I speak out? And ChatGPT said, music has always been a battlefield between the art and industry. Generative AI is the latest tool promising to put creative controls back in the hands of artists. But as the saying goes, the devil's in the detail. Now, Boomy is a generative AI platform for music. It promises to help artists create, distribute, and reach new audiences. But if you look closely at the fine print, it's clear that the deal may be more exploitative than empowering. Now let's rewind a few decades. In the 1980s, record labels were notorious for offering what they called deals that often robbed artists of their rights, their revenue, and their creative control. For many musicians, signing was a last resort. They wanted exposure, but the price was steep. They were handing over the music to companies that cared more about the bottom line than their artistry. Now Boomy is doing something eerily similar, but with high-tech twist. Any music created on Boomy's platform, well, Boomy owns it. Artists are signing away their rights from the moment their music is generated. It's a modern spin of an exploitative record deals of the past, but it doesn't stop there. Boomy has total control over how your music is used. As an artist, you don't get to decide whether your track appears in a commercial, a video game, or some new media down the line. You've given Boomy global perpetual license to do with it as they please. In many ways, this is worse than the 80s. Back then, artists might have lost control, but at least they were signing for a label support, their promotion, potentially life-changing opportunities. With Boomy, artists are creating music for the price of a subscription, but they aren't gaining ownership, they're giving it up. Now let's talk money. Boomy has a revenue sharing model, but here's the catch. They control the net revenue. After Boomy takes its cut, they give artists a percentage, often only a fraction of a penny per stream. It's a model that can feel more like a dead end than a path to financial independence. And recently, Boomy announced a major partnership with ADA, Warner Music Group, indie distributor. At first glance, this looks like an opportunity for artists to gain exposure, but let's break this down. ADA now has access to a massive catalog of music that Boomy technically owns. For big labels, this means access to endless content without having to pay traditional artist fees. A modern record label's dream, endless content for pennies on the dollar. It's almost like this was planned. Big record companies have been losing their grips on artists for years as independent distribution and streaming made it easier to release music without a label. Now, with platforms like Boomy, they're getting back control of a massive global music catalog for peanuts. And artists, they're getting scraps while their music becomes just another asset in Boomy's library. So who's really benefiting? Not the artists who are pouring their creativity into the tracks they'll never own, and not the listener who think they're supporting an indie music but are really feeding the machine. Boomy's deal is crafted to look artist-friendly, but beneath the surface it's just another form of exploitation. Generative AI in music has immense potential, but companies like Boomy need to be transparent and fair. Artists deserve to keep their rights, their revenues, and their integrity. If we're not careful, this could be the 1980s all over again, a time when music was controlled not by those who created it, but by those who profited from it. Demand fair terms. Support real artists. Be cautious with generative AI platforms. I'm not saying that they're all bad, at all. I'm not taking a stance against them even, but these kinds of terms and conditionings, absolutely. And thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. It all helps. Let's hold platforms accountable, protect the future of music.